The packaging is important. You know, you got the Roger Dean artwork.
And I've seen a lot of reactions to the Gates of Delirium, and even for the first listen, they seem to get it, which kind of surprises me sometimes, right? Some of them are teary-eyed by the end with John's voice and then the pedal steel.
I mean, I wouldn't say Relayer is my favorite Yes album, but Gates of Delirium is my favorite Yes.
Yeah.
Music, without a shadow of a doubt. I never tire of being excited by it. It never fails to move me. The ending, the excitement and energy. I don't think there's a wasted moment in it, and that's something I don't think you can say about a lot of Yes. Although you do have peaks and troughs within it, it's all perfectly balanced. I can picture the armies, marching into battle, and the aftermath of the battle with the Soon section. It paints a very vivid picture, and I adore it.
I bought the album back in 1974 when I was 16, listening to Sound Chaser. It was like, I was thinking to myself, they're just showing off. But then, yeah, that's what musicians do. They show off, right? Like, look what I can do. So, I appreciate it now.
In a way, they go further out, even on Relayer. But I think what you start to see with the progressive rock bands at this time is an opening up to American influences. You could see, yes, they're trying different ideas out, I think. And with Relayer, they bring a lot more sort of jazz fusion in and improvisation, a lot more chaos in the sound.
The spirit of Mahavishnu Orchestra is just flying around everywhere. And if you think about that time in music history, that jazz fusion stuff was really infiltrating in a lot of cool, unique, and interesting places. No more so than in Patrick Moraz's good keyboard work on this album.
When you read up on interviews at that time, it's actually John Anderson that talks more about Mahavishnu Orchestra and that whole fusion sound. It was John, I think, that was probably more than Mraz. It's often thought that Mraz changed the dynamic of that album, but I'm really not sure. I think they would have done it anyway.
That's a really interesting mix, but they're exploring different areas. And I've always felt that run of albums, Topographic Oceans, Relayer, and Going for the One, are absolute masterpieces, and they are up there with the Yes album, Fragile and Close to the Edge.
1974, what a great year, man. I always thought of it in my mind as maybe like just a little bit less important than 72 or 73, but when I went through my albums that turned 50 episode, I could have easily done a top 100. This album is just unlike anything Yes ever put out. I love it. I've got an older brother that hates this thing. He absolutely despises Relayer. He thinks it's noisy and clanky. He considers it the worst of Yes's 70s output. He's dead wrong, man.
I find it really hard to think of Relayer and not think of that album cover. I think it is one of my favorite paintings by Roger Dean.
I have it as my wallpaper backdrop on my computer at home. It is my favorite piece of work that Dean did. I love the colors, the beige, brown.
I'm colorblind with red and green, so maybe I don't see, although I know it doesn't have too much, it's more grays and whatever, but yeah, it's amazing artwork.
You just got to take a minute for Roger Dean's artwork. And it really does kind of mirror the music found within, right? I would just watch this label spinning around, with the snakes.
The snakes are an interesting one. I think they represent maybe the aggression on the album. It must have been that Roger Dean was aware that this album was going to be more, nasty and energetic, and it has more anger and venom in the album than anything that he has ever done. And to me, that's what the snake represents. The snake represents threat and foreboding, which is really where the Gates of Delirium track is at. It's quite a nasty song.
So
abrasive, yeah.
It's almost heavy metal.
The one thing that was interesting when I researched it was the fact that the Soon section was the first part that he wrote, and the idea that you have this beautiful conclusion, and he didn't quite know then what would have to happen to arrive at that point, and he almost wrote the song in reverse, which I think is quite an interesting approach.
I think To Be Over is never really talked about like it should be, so I think that might be my favorite. And I know that it's one of Steve Howe's favorites. Not that influenced me. I found that out later.
To Be Over, I enjoy. It's a song which, in the making of my Story of Yes, Story of Relay, a documentary, I kind of enjoyed that one the most. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed that track, To Be Over. The story behind the song is that Steve Howe wrote it whilst walking around a lake in Hyde Park in London. And I was actually there only 2 weeks ago, and I cycled around Hyde Park Lake and just hearing that song in my head and thinking, wow, this is what Steve Howe saw when he first coined that melody.
What do you think about the way Relayer kind of reflects Close to the Edge? Because you've got a whole side song, and then you've got 2 long songs.
Yeah, they didn't learn their lesson.
Whether or not Relayer could have been a double album is an interesting one. There's certainly enough things kicking around. You've got 4 or 5 solo albums worth of material must have been half written around that time. They could have made that a double album. The Turn of the Century song, that was known to have been played at that time. Not long after it was recorded, they were playing Awaken, that high vibration song, in 75. So that might have been bubbling around. So perhaps Relayer could have been a double. Who knows?
Wow,
interesting.
I'd like to travel to that parallel universe and see what that album turned out like.
Sound Chaser is something which I think starts off incredibly well. The introduction to it is perhaps the best bit on the album, but I don't think it sustains it. Although I like Steve Howe's guitar. I mean, I don't play a single musical instrument. It's probably my biggest regret in life. But I know fans of Howe's guitar, and probably yourself, they seem to like the middle section of Sound Chaser when Howe goes full throttle on a big solo. But myself, I could do without that moment. I feel it lacks something, that it loses its momentum. And it picks it up again towards the end, but
sometimes I love Sound Chaser and I love the solo in the middle. Other times I feel a little impatient for the solo to get over with. Yeah, I'm sort of divided in the middle there. I don't know.
That's the thing about this band. Every single track I've heard as being like the greatest one and the worst one. And it's impossible to be objective about a band like Yes. And that's what I love about them. And in prog rock in general, it does divide an awful lot of people. Some people who wouldn't dare even listen to drama. They don't class it as proper Yes. And for some, they wouldn't have, let alone 90125. Whereas I love it all. There's moments in all this stuff that I enjoy. It's equally valid. I don't think any one particular era or album stakes a claim to being any more Yes than any other, really.
Stay tuned for part 2 of the Prog Dog Retrospective, Relayer by Yes, 50 Years.